Hey guys, welcome back to Winterwolf's Den, or maybe I should say welcome back to Winterwolf's Infirmary, because holy hell, it has not been a pleasant joint up in here for the last 5 days, I can tell you that. Got all kinds of cold and sickness going through the Winterwolf family right now. Everybody's okay, it's not COVID, it's not anything knockdown, drag out, but we got a number of coughing attacks. We've been through about 4,000 boxes of tissues and all kinds of disgusting shit. So bear with the new acoustics of my, acoustics, I can't even talk. Bear with the new acoustics of my voice. I'm going to try and get us back on track here. Unfortunately, King Z and I were not able to produce an episode 7 review for you guys for Andor. We're really disappointed. We ran into a technical gaffe with my recording software. I use Filmora 11 for those of you that don't know. And it told me that MP4 suddenly wasn't a supported file type. So after we recorded a really good, really thoughtful breakdown of episode 7, which we both really did enjoy, we ended up not being able to come through and put out one of our long-form videos. But in order to keep us on track, I needed to touch base after taking a couple days off, a couple sick days from work, just to get my act together and be able to actually talk and put together a sentence for you guys. I'm still going to be cutting out lots of coughs, so bear with me. I'm going to give you a quick breakdown, a much shorter video, just so we can stay on track and just touch on some of the key points that King Z and I really did enjoy about Andor episode 7. I'm really pissed that we didn't get out the long form one last week. It would have been really good. We had a really good back and forth on this one. Let me hit you with the synopsis of Andor episode 7. In the aftermath of the heist on Aldhani, Andor tries to move on to quieter pastures with his newfound wealth, but hits a sticking point when a close friend can't go with him. Elsewhere, ISB Junior Officer Miro is accused of illegally accessing Imperial data to pursue her theory of a rising rebellion. Vel hits an ominous snag in her dealings with Rael. Mon Mothma enlists the aid of a former childhood friend with connections to the banking sector and high finance, and Karn finds out finally what sort of job Uncle Harlow flexed to get him. And by the end of the episode, Andor steps in a pile of Imperial horseshit and finds himself staring down the barrel of a 6-year prison sentence. Guys, it was a pretty good recovery episode. If King Z were here, he'd tell you that we're back on the setup phase of the game. You know, he's a big fan of the three-step approach. You know, the setup, the execution, and the payoff. We're definitely back on setup footing. Again, for people that are enjoying the show, I think most people probably would have rated this as kind of like a middle-level episode. There's not a lot of high action that goes on, but again, the story is moving forward, and it's kind of transitioning now into what the next half of the episodes is going to look like. The heist is done. The money's been taken. Vel and Andor survived. Obviously, they've parted ways at this point. The rest of the team is dead to the best of our knowledge. I'm pretty sure we saw bodies for all of them. We know Cinta is also still alive. That's Vel's girlfriend. She's still trying to get off-world she's trying to still evac Ferrix still. But she's out there in the mix somewhere. So instead of giving you guys the breakdown of the scene-by-scene flow, which I just can't do right now just in terms of breath and breathing and reading and everything, and you probably noticed I talk fast anyway, so I'm sorry about that. But there were 5 or 6 big scenes that we were talking about that we really liked, that had some really good interpersonal conflicts. We get really starting to get some heads butting as people's goals don't line up into being mutual, that people have different wants and desires and needs, and it doesn't always lend itself to smooth sailing, even though it looks like it should be, because the good guys won. So the first scene that I wanted to talk about is one of my favorite kind of B plots to what's going on in the show. It's an Imperial Security Bureau scene where Patagar's boss, that's Miro's direct supervisor, the older gentleman, or Grand Maester Qyburn from Game of Thrones, if you remember him. Colonel Yulliran takes the gloves off and basically announces to everybody that's assembled in the ISB boardroom that we're putting everybody in the room on notice. Any resources you need to hunt down and strike back against whoever did this, against whoever was responsible for the heist. We're making these resources available. Army, Navy, it's all on standby for you guys to use. Like, we're gonna crush whatever opposition happens. They list out a bunch of civil penalties that they're gonna impose on any worlds deemed collaborating with any rebels and things like that. So they're when they talk about in episode 4, the movie's A New Hope, when Tarkin says to his assembled boardroom, that the Emperor has kind of, swept away the end of the Republic. And then Leia's response later to Tarkin when she's brought on board is that, the more you tighten your grasp, the more systems will slip through your fingers. It kind of it didn't tie specifically back to that, or intrinsically back to that. I mean, it was like kind of a callback to that. It had that same kind of vibe to it. So that was it was good to see the Imperials starting to get their crackdown on. And as we see at the end of the episode, all the things that they say that are going to happen are kind of the things that are executed upon later. So again, we have really good setup and payoff on this show where writers clearly thought out through lines that they were trying to pursue and then actually made good on them. So we get very little in this episode of the other members of the team that pulled the heist. Just like I mentioned before, Cinta is still trying to evac Ferrix. She's still out there. An interesting scene that does come up that kind of shows, it develops a little bit more of Vel and Rael's relationship and, what Rael's true intentions might be. Vel has attempted to summon Rael to have like a little debrief, but instead of Rael showing up, the shopkeeper shows up. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, guys. And the shopkeeper basically shows up and kind of shuts down any kind of talk about, you worrying about anything other than doing the next right thing. And, Rael's never going to come on his own because he's the brains, the whole thing. He's not going to expose himself. And it was stupid for you to even try to contact us. So don't do that shit again. And then basically she puts Vel up to, understanding Andor's a loose end. And they can't just have him running around the galaxy knowing that, knowing who and where Rael has been, knowing that he's responsible for the heist, that he's got access to that kind of cash. So basically, in so many words, they basically leave it as the shopkeeper, kind of handing down Rael's orders that Andor needs to be taken care of, like capital T, taken care of. And Vel's not digging that. But she's still, at this point, like a little foot soldier, and it's left looking like she's going to execute the plan. So that was a nice little ominous change, and as Kingsley and I talk about a lot on the show, it's typical of like the spy genre that these kind of double crosses happen within like factions and things like that. So it's cool that they're keeping to that kind of tone. We get back to Ferrix. Andor's back in the old neighborhood. He has a couple of goodbye scenes. Neither of them end kind of well for him. He says goodbye to Bix, who basically says, you can't be here. It's too dangerous for you to be here. They have it's kind of an emotional beat where they hint a little bit more directly that they've had a romantic past, and they leave it with Andor basically saying, you have to learn to, you have to not worry about me, kind of thing. And she goes, yeah, I'm getting pretty good at that. And he kind of pisses off, but he does leave behind a credit stack big enough to cover all his debts on World. So he's going to pay off Nurchi. He's going to pay Brasso back. He has money for Bix, money for another person that he owed money to. So he ties up all his loose ends before he goes. But the big gut punch comes when he has to say goodbye to Marva. Marva, he wants to take with him. That's his like adoptive parent, like that's his mom. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what we would do. But she's, she comes up with some nonsense where, she says, well, let's talk in the morning. I'm just tired and you wanting to go. It's kind of like, I got to sleep on it and this and that. He has the goodbye scene with Bix, and when he gets back to the house, Marva's now ironclad that basically she can't go. The Imperials somebody has to stand up to the Imperials, and she's, run her whole life, and tried to avoid being involved and standing for something, and she can't do it anymore. And we get a little bit more backstory into Andor's adoptive father, whose name is Clem, which I didn't know from episode 1. The guy that basically picked him up from the salvage job that he and Marva were on, his name was Clem. The only reason I know that is because I went back and double checked with the subtitles on, because I think they only ever said his name once. That scene, it's done up, it's written well, it's scored very well. The music absolutely gut punches you when you realize that if you hadn't picked it up before, that like he basically, the code name he used was like his adopted father's name. It was pretty badass. We actually get to see a really good flashback about how Clem dies, and it's basically he's trying to break up a street protest and people throwing rocks at stormtroopers, in like a flashback from like 15-20 years ago. And of course he gets left holding the bag after he gets these jackasses to stop throwing rocks. One of them actually hits a stormtrooper and it ends up getting him hanged. It's kind of fucked. And one of the parts of the flashback, they show young Andor kind of storming the like an Imperial line, which obviously he'd get himself killed if he actually followed through on that. So we're waiting for another flashback later to kind of tie that all up. But it was really touching. The stuff with Marva is really good, where she basically says, we're on different paths and I'm not judging you, but you have to find your own way, and I have to stay here, because for like 25 years I couldn't walk down the street where they hung him. But after I heard what happened on Aldhani, I have some hope, and I walked down that street to come home smiling today. And because she's kind of a badass old mercenary, salvage expert, pirate bitch, I bet she has a role to play coming up. Like, she's not going to be a helpless old bitch just laying around. That's not how she's going out. But it was really well done. The actress is really good. That was a pretty slapping scene, actually. The waterworks almost came on that one. It was good stuff there. I love the family vibe that these two have. It's one of the better relationships on the show, I think. Next scene of interest is Rael and Mon Mothma. So the veil's starting to crack for these two as well. Mon Mothma shows up to his shop trying to get some answers on what went down on Aldhani. Was Rael behind it? And Rael has this interesting kind of breakdown of his shopkeeper character versus his more gravelly toned spy master character. He's trying to keep up appearances, but certain lines of dialogue he reverts back to like his actual speaking voice. And it's kind of, we're seeing like the mask slip a little bit. So that was pretty cool. Mon Mothma, he basically tells Mon Mothma, like, this is what you signed up for. If you can't take the heat, surrender now and get the fuck out, because we have to do this. Because he's basically letting her in on what the ugly truth is in terms of like revolution and rebellion. Like, there is no rebellion where people don't suffer. There's no revolution where somebody doesn't get hurt in order to execute and get the kind of change you want it done. So when she gasps at one point, the people are going to be hurt based on what you did. He goes, we need that. We need them to hate the Empire for cracking down. So it's like, she's trying to get from point A to point B one way. He has another path completely envisioned a different way. And we're going to see them probably diverge at some point. It'll be interesting how, since we know where she ends up long term and he's a new character for the show, it'll be interesting to see how they finally write him out, or whatever they do with Rael. But it's good. They play off each other really well, and I'm enjoying that kind of back and forth. Also, it's another good bit of character butting head conflict kind of stuff. We like that stuff. Another similar scene is Mon Mothma holding her high society first dinner for the new foundation kind of fundraising event. Delegates and dignitaries all over the place. She basically kind of gets the attention of an old school friend who's now kind of a mucky-muck one-percenter in the financial sector with access to money and things like that. And she's really slick. She kind of baits him into admitting that his politics are kind of hardline, because he has this like coy little line of dialogue where he goes, I don't want to talk about politics. My politics aren't for everybody. They're whatever. And she goes, you might be surprised. And then she basically just lets her veil completely drop after she ascertains that he'll probably be sympathetic to the cause. And she's basically trying to enlist him to kind of launder the credits that they've obtained and just allow her access to her family fortune, which had been being monitored, by the Imperials, things like that. So she's kind of using to install him as like the chairperson of the foundation. That way it's something he does. He's probably on the board of directors at other charities and this and that. So he's a pawn on the board, and I'm betting he bites it kind of hard. There were a couple of lines in there that the subtext was pretty thick, that he'll probably be the first person that maybe she gets killed. Maybe that's a Winter Wolf prediction for you guys. It could be a thing. So that was a pretty good scene there. And then, of course, the conversation gets interrupted by her douche nozzle husband, who kind of fucks that shit up. So they agree to talk later. The next kind of cool scene that comes through, we get the resolution of Karn, not the resolution. We get the next step in Karn for this episode here. The big job that Uncle Harlow was able to secure him is basically an entry-level data entry job in like the Imperials version of the departments of weights and measures. And basically what happens is he agrees tentatively to take the job earlier in the episode, but it's after he kind of takes a step to kind of reasserting himself and of not being like a loser kind of character. Like he's not just being completely obliterated by his overbearing mother. He tells the guy that's hiring him, I was, Primorless security. Something happened. A couple guys died. I wanted to report it because I believe in the law, and I ended up getting, holding the bag for this kind of thing. But I fully intend on clearing my name. And the guy's like, all right, cool. Let's just help you do that by editing this little resume and, making it less questionable for other people that might be looking. But he does end up taking the job. The last shot we see against him plays not directly against how Andor ends up in the episode, but it's nifty because what they do with Karn is they show him in his cubicle and they pull back really slow, and it's in a massive cube farm. Think cube farm like how the Imperial Senate's set up, where they have all the pods that kind of just zip in when the different senators are talking. It's not on that aerial scale, but when they pull back, there's just endless grids of people just like 2 monitor workstationing, like basic data entry, record keeping crap. But we know that he's aware of what happened on Aldhani, and he's going to be taking some steps to probably to get back involved with investigating what happened. King Z's big prediction there was that ISB Officer Miro is going to see his name on that report that he wasn't supposed to write in episode 3 or episode 1 or whatever, that his boss told him to just kind of sweep under the rug, and she'll get in contact with him and maybe find a way to get him reinstated or work with him, I'm sure. Like I said, this episode, Jesus Christ, that scene plays really well against how Andor ends up. So we see Karn ending up in a prison of the mind, because if he's going to get buried underneath paperwork, he's kind of boned. Andor's taking his money. He's flown out of Ferrix. He's out. He goes to a planet called Niamos, Niamos. I've never heard of that in Star Wars universe, but it's cool. It gives off an impression of kind of like a Sandals resort. It's got a very tropical vibe to it. It's got nice beaches. We get to see shore troopers, in their we get the green and kind of the dog sage green maroon stormtrooper armor, kind of cool. It's got some weird kind of like, I don't want to call it island music, but it's got a kind of a sound that I hadn't heard in Star Wars music before, and I wasn't sure if I liked it at first, but I ended up liking it. Andor is basically shacking up with somebody there. He's heading out in the morning, to like a morning run to the store. He's grabbing smokes and booze or whatever the fuck she sent him out for. But along the way, a couple of people are kind of running past stormtroopers, like they're being pursued by stormtroopers. And, he kind of, he's getting out of the way a little bit. He's not trying to be involved or anything else, keeping his head down, doing his thing. But when he gets up to the plaza where the store is, some dickbag fucking shore trooper's like, hey, you running with those guys over there? And he's like, nah, I'm just a tourist. And they get into a little bad cop back and forth kind of thing. And doesn't fucking Andor end up getting choked out by like a KX droid, taken into custody, charged with like disturbing the peace and some other gangster shit? But because of what went down with the Imperials at the beginning, they've reviewed all possible criminal penalties, and anything that could be aiding and abetting is getting like a 5-time sentence or a 6-time sentence kind of thing. So it should have been like 6 months in the clink for disturbing the peace or whatever it was. The magistrate he sees basically gives him 6 years. So Andor going to jail. I haven't seen the next episode yet. I'm a little behind, still recovering. So I'm not sure if episode 8 picks right up with him being locked up, but we're gonna check that out. So as Karn ends up in a prison for the mind in his cubicle at the end, Andor is gonna get ferried off to an Imperial detention center somewhere, and he'll be in a different kind of prison altogether. And one of the other scenes that King Z wanted me to mention, I just totally forgot until now, and I'm kind of pissed because that's one of my favorite scenes. The altercation between Blevin and Miro comes to yet another head earlier on, where basically he tries to file a charge against her for like tampering and like sabotage because she's accessed records on his sector, because Ferrix was his sector. To investigate the goings on and whatnot. And she basically lays it out. They're like, no, I used the new Imperial Security, Act or whatever, their version of the Patriot Act, to access records without a formal requisition, because we can do that because you don't seem like you can handle it. And once again, Colonel Pettigar there takes her side and basically says, well, she's kind of forward thinking on this, and maybe there is something to it, and maybe we should look further into this. And he basically, he tests her, he prods her kind of thesis and shit like that, and makes her explain reasoning, and then is like, okay, you go to it. Ferrix is now yours. You're off the case, Blevin. Let Miro take a look at it. So, the only thing I'd say politically about this episode, is we like to sidebar into these things at least once, is, this is the actress that told us pre-show that, she's a woman being held down by the patriarchy in the ISB. And I'm like, well, your boss has now like backed you like 4 fucking times. You have a competitor. Blevins got no use for you, but nobody else has tried to like cock block any of the game you're running. You have an assistant who looks up to you that kind of does all your dirty work and does all your, regular assistant shit. He seems to like you. So, I mean, I don't get it. Like, you were trying to use the interview and, like, Variety as, like, your soapbox to, like, bitch, whine, and complain about women being kept down by the patriarchy. They're like, yeah, you might be the only junior female officer in that room, but they've said 4 times you were recruited for your fucking talent. You weren't a diversity hire. So, like, I don't see what your gripe is here, actress. I really don't. The character's great. I love Miro, the character, but the actress, I'm like, you're giving me vibes from, like, like Deeza from Rings of Power. Like, you ran your trap about, your character is a great activist, but then, like, 8 episodes into the show, you've done no activisming, and you're actually trying to, like, seize power for your own benefit. Like, you like, stop using these things as soapboxes. It's unnecessary, and it makes you look like a jackass when it doesn't jive with what's happening on screen. House of the Dragon has a couple of smaller, similar issues like that as well, where some of the actors wanted to make big ass deals about how, the whole season is a moratorium on reproductive rights in the wake of, Roe v. Wade being overturned. And I'm like, this show was written and shot 2 years before fucking that decision happened. What the fuck are you talking about? So just knock that shit off. Don't make it so we can't enjoy the fucking show. So that was a pretty good scene between the ISB guys kind of having to prove their points and things like that, and just seeing how basically Patagar, who's in charge, kind of shits on everybody. He's just like this dickhead old curmudgeon-y, like, private school teacher. Like, if you guys have seen, like, Dead Poet Society, like, he's the old a-hole that would have been the headmaster of that school. Like, that's his character, but he shits literally on everybody, including Miro, until she proves her points. Then he gets this, like, bemused, like, oh, all right, cool, yeah, let's go check that out. So it's not all, like, stop. Just make it and keep it like that, keep it like that. But so those are some of the key scenes that we enjoyed on the takeaway, guys. Where it goes from here, nobody can say. What'll be interesting, I guess, since we know he's getting locked up, I don't think they're going to spring him before he gets to the lockup. And King Z was in agreement. He thinks that basically Vel's going to have to get other people on the inside of the prison that he's going to. We were kind of bandying some ideas back and forth where we're like, this is probably where he meets Saw Gerrera's group or helps them escape. And then they kind of join the rebellion with more of like an anarchist X Factor kind of outlook on, how to be extremists or something. So they have a lot of wiggle room they can play with. But I'm going to get out of here, guys. I've gagged enough on all over this microphone today doing this episode 7. Hopefully I'm feeling a little bit better and we can get back on track and get you guys episode 8 by the weekend. See what's going on with that. Next up for me, solo style, I'm probably going to do a Black Adam review. Just caught that last night. I'm just putting together a couple of notes on that because I have a couple things to say about Black Adam, but I don't want to bury the lead on that. But until next time, guys, give me a like, give me a comment about Andor. It doesn't seem like it's doing that well in the ratings, but fuck if I'm not enjoying the show and King Z's enjoying it. Sub to the channel. I really appreciate all the support, and we will see you guys in the next one.